The single most important is persistence. People will point to all kinds of virtues amongst athletes. This guy's the most courageous, this guy's the strongest. These are all virtues. But the one indispensable virtue is persistence. The ability just to stay in the game long enough to get the results you seek. Most people see it as a kind of simplistic doggedness where you just show up every day. That's not it. The most important form of persistence is persistence of thinking, which looks to push you in increasingly efficient, more and more efficient methods of training. Famously, people talk about the idea that the hardest work of all is hard thinking, and they're absolutely right. Okay, coming into the gym and just doing the same thing for a decade isn't going to make you better. What's going to make you better is progressive training over time, where you identify clear goals marked out in time increments, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 5 years, and build those short-term goals into a program of long-term goals, making sure that the training program changes over time so that as your skill level rises, the challenges you face in the gym become higher and higher. Don't kill them at the start with challenges that are too hard for them to deal with. They get discouraged and leave. Build them slowly over time, but make sure they don't just get left in a swamp where they're just doing the same thing they were doing 3 years ago and they get bored.
I'm a huge believer in the idea of small progressive movements towards goals. If you look at the course of an average day that we all go through, every so often, maybe 2 or 3 times in your life, there's one day which changes the direction of your life. But the vast majority of our days are unexceptional. They're just a boring, mundane day. You come home at the end of the day, and if someone asks you, what happened today? You would literally have to think back and be like, I'm not sure. That's probably a description of 95% of our days. So there's a chance in which you could drift through your life where only about 1 to 5% of your days have any real meaning, and that 95% of your life was a waste of time. And that's a tragedy. So we have to be very, very set on this idea that we have to maximize the use of all of our days if we're going to amount to anything in life. And that means at the end of every day, there has to be a concerted look on your part. What was the most significant thing that happened to me today, and how will it influence my life tomorrow? And if we can do this, your days become progressive. Most people live day to day where the events of yesterday have no bearing on the events of today, and the events of today have no bearing on the events of tomorrow. And this means your life will simply run in a flat line until the day you die. But if we make a concerted effort to build one day upon another, even if it's just a very small thing, and in most cases it will be a small thing. It's rare that we have a day where something monumental happens. Most days are not monumental, they're mundane. So on every one of these mundane days, we have to take one small little gem that happened. It may not be very big, something small, and add that to your performance tomorrow. And if we can do this over 10 years, something truly remarkable can happen.
There has to be a sense in which you can't be too forgiving. You have to test hypotheses. But on the other hand, you can't be too ruthless either. You have to look for promise, and my advice is start slow. Like, again, the analogy of lifting weights. You don't lift the heaviest weights on your first day. You build up, you work progressively over time. Now, you also have to have some common sense here. You can't be too forgiving to a technique if it's repeatedly failing, and good people have tried it, and multiple good people have tried it, and it's just not working out, then okay, it's time to dismiss it. But don't be too quick. Growth, as it does in organic life forms, comes from small beginnings and builds over time. You can't take an untested, untried move and get it on a world champion black belt. It's going to get crushed. So it's not ready for that. It's like a lion cub being thrown out into the Serengeti plains. The lion cub is just too small and too ineffective. It's a lion, but it's a cub. And it's not until it grows into maturity that it can be a lion that can dominate the Serengeti plains. You have to see training for what it is. Training is about skill development, not about winning or losing. You've got to understand that you don't need to win every battle. You only need to win the battles that count. And the battles that count are in the World Championship finals, okay? That's the one that counts. Think about that win, okay? That's the one you're going to be remembered for. You're not going to be remembered for the battle you lost on Tuesday afternoon at 3 p.m. in some nameless gym with some guy that no one cares about. No one's going to remember that. You're going to be remembered for your peak performances, not your everyday performances. Focus your everyday performances on skill development so that your peak performances you can focus on winning. I have a fervent belief that human beings in most skill activities, not all skill activities, but I will say combat sports for sure, can reinvent themselves in 5-year periods. This is not an unrealistic goal. There is a lot of empirical evidence to show that people have done this in the past, a lot of it. So if you fully immerse yourself in a sport, with a well-worked-out, well-planned training program, there is a mountain of evidence to show that in a 5-year period, you can go from a complete beginner to very, very impressive skill level, to the point where you're competitive with some of the best people on the planet. You can reinvent yourself in these 5-year periods. What happens with most people is they get to a certain level and they get complacent, they get lazy, and they just keep doing the same old thing they've been doing. But if you're diligent and you're purposeful, 5 years, you can accomplish an awful lot. And as I said, there's a mountain of evidence to show it. You can train someone and teach them technique until you're blue in the face. But at some point, the athlete in question has to go out there on the stage and pull the trigger when the time is right. What's going to give you that ability to go from the physical skills that you've learned to execution under pressure is confidence. Building that confidence is the key to championship performance. And the single best way to do it is to take away the innate fear that we all have of bad outcomes that makes us naturally risk averse.